Let us take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place, and in doing so, recognize the various traditional lands on which we do our business today. We wish to acknowledge this land on which this SBC meeting is taking place. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Hohokam, the Acamel O'odham, and most recently, the Salt River Pima Indian community. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many indigenous people from across Maricopa, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on this land. Okay, today's meeting, we're going to begin like we normally do with a Q&A with Dr. Menzel, and then we're going to hear from a panel about school safety. We have Dr. Menzel, we have Josh Friedman, Director of Safety and Security, Shannon Cron, Director of Support Services, and Sergeant Kevin Bingham with the Scottsdale Police Department. And how this panel will work is we're actually going to let all of you ask questions. But the only caveat is you have to ask your question into the microphone because we record these meetings and put them on YouTube for people who can't attend. And if you don't speak into the microphone, they can't hear you. And hopefully they can hear me because I can't talk that loud right now. After the panel, we'll talk for, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes. Then we'll end the meeting with some executive board updates and any updates from our representatives. However, the first thing that we want to do today is have, if you are a school rep, if you could kind of stand up and quickly introduce yourself. Awesome, okay.
Hi everybody, I'm Justin Keene. I'm from Pima Elementary. I'm a parent.
Hi, I'm Emmy Cardella. I'm a rep for Cheyenne, and then I also have a student at Desert Mountain.
Hi, I'm Danielle Bate, parent and APT board at Cochise Elementary School.
Jessica Scordo, parent, Echo Canyon.
Cassie Schmidt, rep for Kokopah, and then I have kids at Sequoia, and I'm also a district sub.
Camille Bussey, I'm a parent for Sequoia. Piper Hunkins, I am a parent at Arcadia High School and also on the PTO board.
Hi, Kristen Cater. I'm a parent at Anasazi Elementary.
Awesome, thank you all so much. Okay, so I have some questions in the basket here for Dr. Menzel. If you have another question, we have index cards over there. If you could just write it on that and hand it over. Okay, the first question is, did SUSD participate in the Arizona School Personnel Administrators Association survey about staffing levels? And then KJZZ reported that many positions remained vacant and that over 50% of positions were filled using alternative requirements. Is this true also in SUSD?
So my understanding is we did participate. Our former assistant superintendent, Alexis Wilson, had been the president of that association, so we have active involvement. But those trends that are true across the state are not true in Scottsdale. While we do have some staff that have emergency credentials, it's not close to the 50% that's statewide.
Okay. Well, how many are vacant?
Vacant, that list continues to decline. I don't know the exact numbers, but we are doing a much better job of tracking what's filled and what's not, and most teaching positions have been filled.
Okay. What was the tax thing that was decided at last night's board meeting?
So that's, I think, relating to what happened after executive session.
Yes.
So you might remember the Kazimir lawsuit that resulted in recapture of funding from a number of taxing entities, including Scottsdale Unified School District. What the county is recapturing from us is $23.7 million. We had some questions and concerns with respect to how the dollar amount was calculated, and more importantly, questions about why the district is responsible for the interest that accrued as a result of the judgment. And Maricopa County Community College District had filed a notice of claim, so we've had some conversations with them on this same topic, and they have the same concerns. And what it comes down to is that when the county was first notified that they were improperly assessing taxes on certain parcels, they disagreed with it and continued, and they lost at multiple levels and still continued to tax at the wrong rate. all along the way accruing interest related to the improper assessments. And so now, when the judgment's final and they have to recapture funding, they're not only capturing the principal, which we understand why we would have to repay that, but we believe that the interest costs associated with it are completely a result of their decisions. We had no say. We were not apprised. We were not asked to provide input. And so in order to potentially bring a claim, you have to file a notice of claim first, and there's a statutory timeline. So we talked with the governing board about the potential for filing a notice of claim. They agree that even if we don't go further in terms of a potential lawsuit, filing a notice of claim protects the right of the next board to be able to go down that road should we choose to. And I would argue that being one of multiple who are impacted by this, it will get the county's attention in a very different way. And I think if we failed to do that, it would tell the county that they can act without being responsible at all for the implications of their action. And I don't believe that taxpayers in Scottsdale should have to bear the burden of a decision that was made by someone at Maricopa County when that should be a shared responsibility, not one that's put on the backs of our taxpayers.
How much is the interest of the total?
So Shannon Crozier estimates it's a little bit more than $5 million of the 23.
Okay. The Atlantic recently published a thought-provoking story about how college students, including at highly selective universities, struggle to read and analyze complete books. The story mentioned that many K-12 curricula are excerpt-based, and even classes like AP Literature read fewer books than they used to. Has SUSD administration read this story? How is SUSD preparing students to be able to read and think critically over extended periods of time?
So I haven't read the article. Would love if someone sends it to me. I'd be happy to read it.
It's being read in some of the AP Literature classes
good,
in high school.
good.
Yeah.
And I don't think this is a matter of either or. There's a lot of value in reading full text, and there's a ton of material to cover. And so what has happened in the educational trajectory is in our efforts to cover all of the standards that we have, and this is true of American education and different from what you might find in European countries, we are a mile wide and an inch deep, and other countries go much deeper, so they cover less content, but they do it at a scale and depth that really cements the knowledge. And while this has been discussed for the last 25 or 30 years in terms of how we're structured, we just add more standards all the time. So part of what you're seeing happen is in order to cover the content, you are very intentional about what you pull from excerpts, but there's a lot that's lost, right? You don't get the same from Cliff Notes as you do from actually reading the full text.
Okay, the last question is, how is Conmigo being used in classrooms?
So we are working with the state on the funding for Conmigo that they've offered. I don't know who's using it right now or how it might be utilized unless it's a la carte, but there is some effort to work with the state to be able to create that opportunity for students to use Conmigo to support and accelerate math achievement.
Does everyone know what Conmigo is? Okay, what is Conmigo?
So Conmigo is an AI tool created by Sal Khan Academy, who has done a lot to help students master math, complex math content in ways that have shown tremendous success. And so some of what Khan Academy offered was free of charge. Some things there is a cost. So Conmigo is essentially an online tutoring system, not where they give kids the answer, but where they ask critical questions and help them think about whatever the math problem is that they're working on so that they can get to an understanding of the concepts, its application, and ultimately finding the right answers. So it's an online tutoring system using AI to be able to help students succeed.
Okay, so we'll start with our panel now. I'm going to have you each, into the microphone, introduce yourself. I know we all know who you are because I introduced you at the beginning of the meeting, but kind of what your main role is related to school safety. And then I'll open it up for people to ask
You need me to
questions.
go too, or are we good?
Yeah, you're good.
All right.
I'm Josh Friedman. I'm the Director of Safety and Security. I'm responsible for the school district. I'm responsible for the security officers that are on all the campuses and anything emergency plans and everything related to school safety on the campuses.
I'm Kevin Beanham. I'm the supervisor for the school resource unit. Been a police officer with the city of Scottsdale for 15 years. Have worked over a decade in the schools, either as a school resource officer or as the supervisor for the unit. So I supervise all the SROs that are on campus, including the SSO, which are the school safety officers that are under the grants at the different elementary schools.
Good evening, I'm Shannon Cron. I am the Director of Support Services, and our department oversees everything kind of having to do with positive school environments. So supporting students, making sure that they feel safe at school. If there is something that does happen, that they feel comfortable going to an adult, sharing that information with them. We oversee school social workers, counselors, code of conduct, and also the threat assessments.
Okay, so question time. Raise your hand, I'll bring you the mic. Don't worry, I have questions if people are quiet.
I was going to say, if you want me to run around, like, you don't have to.
Yeah, I'm fine running around, it's more time. No takers yet?
Could you clarify the role of not an SRO, but school security officers, right, is the title?
Safety officer?
No, it's like they're the ones that wear SUSD security on their backs.
Yep. So they are on all of our campuses, high school, middle school, and elementary schools. And their role, I like to say, is they look out while everybody's looking in. While teachers and staff are focused on the students and what's going on in the classrooms and things like that, they're looking out. They look out to ensure that, you know, the people that are on campus are supposed to be there. They monitor the gates. They look at the closed circuit cameras. They are basically safety officers for the entire campus. They do not carry weapons, but they are trained in de-escalation techniques and things like that to be able to be the first responders in events of fights or unruly parents or anything else that occurs on campus.
How do we coordinate across multiple police departments, including town of PV?
So most of our schools are in Scottsdale, so I work very closely with Sergeant Bingham here for the schools within Scottsdale. There's a sergeant that's assigned from the city of Phoenix who oversees the SROs for Phoenix. We have 2 SROs for Phoenix. And then Paradise Valley has a community, I believe his title is community police officer, and he oversees both of our schools as well as several of the churches in the area. So I meet with all 3 agencies on a regular basis to talk about trends. Unfortunately, given the social media stuff that happened in the last few months, Kevin, Sergeant Bingham, and I were on the phone many, many nights until wee hours of the morning. So we actually have a great working relationship with all 3 agencies. We're meeting with the Paradise Valley Police Chief to talk about bringing on additional school resource officer potential in Paradise Valley. I meet with Phoenix all the time. So we have a great relationship. It's open lines of communication with all 3 agencies, and then we try and meet together, all of the 3 supervisors and myself, at least quarterly, if not more often, to discuss trends across all 29 of our campuses.
And for school resource officers, we all communicate with each one another. So if we have an issue or problem or information to share, we share that between each other. So my SROs talk with that. And because, again, we have so many schools in here and our officers have been around for so long, they know even some of the people in Paradise Valley. So we've responded to incidents that happen in Paradise Valley sometimes to assist when need be.
Two-part question. Have the social media threats subsided? It seems like I'm hearing less about that. That would be the first question. And then the next question is, if so, what is the sort of ranking, maybe top 3 biggest threats on campuses this year?
So I'll speak for the social media posts and stuff like that. So yes, they have subsided. We always see a decrease in that. Unfortunately, we always see an increase when we have a school shooting somewhere in the nation. And unfortunately, most of those social media posts end up coming from students that don't want to go to school, and it's can be completely from a different school district, a different state, and then it kind of morphs and gets kind of just transferred over, just like a flood of them come in. So we always see an increase in that. We saw a probably the biggest increase I've seen since being a supervisor this last month. But after the break, we've seen a huge decrease in it. Again, your question was for the three biggest crimes we kind of see on campus? Biggest threats. I really can't say threats. I can more focus on crimes. So usually it has, usually it kind of deals with assault or bullying is something big. Some type of theft of, again, cell phones, items like that. And again, school threats we get every once in a while. When I say school threats, they can be anywhere from social media posts to a student making a comment when they're mad and just kind of investigating that. But again, I really want to call those threats. We obviously look into each one and make sure that it's not a threat, and we treat each as a serious threat until we can deem otherwise. But that's what a lot of my SROs deal with when it comes to threats.
So we're the lucky recipient of a grant at Anasazi, and we've had a officer on campus. I think it started last year. Various agencies across the state would be on campus. We've been really grateful this year to have a couple officers from the Scottsdale PD on campus. I think about 3 rotate, and it's been nice continuity for the students. I think it's been really positive. Is there an end date for that and an opportunity to expand that program to other elementary school campuses across the district?
Yeah, so that's the part of the school safety grant, and it was originally last year, the beginning of last year, and we applied and we were awarded for 2 schools, Anasazi and Yavapai. They have just opened up as of 2 days ago on Monday a second round for that grant, and we are applying for all, I think we're at 13 other schools that don't currently have an SRO on them. They're called SSOs, school safety officers, and the difference between that and an SRO, besides some of the training, is just that we don't get consistent people. Basically, the SSO is an off-duty police officer that just works on the school campuses. And so we are applying. You can't apply for an SSO. You have to apply for the SRO, and then when the police department here says that we don't have enough body officers to fill all the spots, then they switch it to an SSO. So we are applying currently for an SRO for all schools that don't have one. The term of the grant, both the old one and the new one, all end in June of 26. So they all end after next year, and we don't know what'll happen after that in terms of whether the police departments will be able to sustain it or not, or whether we'll be able to sustain it. Currently, all of those officers, any that we get awarded, both from the first round and now the second round, will end in June of 2026. And we have talked to all 3 police chiefs, police departments, about adding additional SROs. Currently, the city of Scottsdale, we're on the list, I think is a good way to put it. When they get more officers, we don't have any, or they don't have any at this point in time, to create new SRO positions. I know that the town of Paradise Valley is anxious to get an SRO position for our schools. So, and then Phoenix as well, they're short, I think it was 1,000 officers last time I heard. So it's a strictly a numbers game, and I'm not even talking financial at this point. It's just there's not enough officers to fill the SRO positions, and the priority is obviously the streets. And so the SSO, which is a short-term stopgap measure that Arizona Department of Education, working with the police chiefs, have come up with to get armed officers on the campuses.
Regarding social workers, so one question, how many campuses have them? And am I incorrect in that a lot of them are on grants that are going to be expiring this year?
Sure. So
And then
right
I
now
had
we
a
are fully
follow-up, sorry.
staffed for our social workers. They fall under that same grant as our SRO officers, so it's the School Safety Program grant. The majority of our schools are staffed at a 1.0. We do have a few of our schools that were staffed at a 0.5, so some of our smaller elementary schools may have received a 0.5 funding, but everybody does have that support on their campus.
So next year, we may
And-
not have that support.
That is the grant which also ends June 2026.
Oh,
So we
one
have
year, one
not heard from ADE what the plan is to either renew or continue or be able to apply for that same grant again.
Okay. And then a follow-up to that is, just today, my daughter's on the way home. They said, "Hey, Mom, so-and-so says hi." I was a social worker because I used to work with her. And my other daughter says, "Who is that?" And so a question for you, and I
Yeah.
also work on a campus, and a lot of students don't know the social worker, which I feel like that's a kind of a problem. Like they should know who that individual is and know how to how to use them if needed. So how do you encourage the social workers to make sure they are very well known and available
Yeah.
to students on campuses?
Absolutely. So we encourage all of our social workers to go on morning announcements, whether it's elementary school, introduce themselves, become a friendly face. A lot of them are doing rotations right now where they're pushing in and they're doing some whole group lessons, and it might look different. So if it's in elementary school, the difference between tattling and reporting, right? Where their goal is just to create, that positive rapport with students so that if something does happen, they can be that safe adult on campus where, they can work with the teacher to address some of those issues, remove barriers, work with the family, connect them to resources. So it's really just about being visible, pushing in, getting to know the students. A lot of times, they're out on the playground at lunch, making sure that kids are included in activities or setting up, activities for, maybe the student that doesn't know how to interact or doesn't have a group of friends that they feel safe or comfortable playing with. So we really just encourage them to be a part of the campus. And, depending on, again, the different levels, it looks very different in elementary than it does in high school. So, but just again, pushing in, being positive, adult on campus that they know that they can go and have a conversation with and that can connect them to resources. So thank you.
In terms of security infrastructure, I'm familiar with the big investments over the past few years in cameras and the system on the buses and the visitor check-in system. Are there future plans for more infrastructure, and is there some sort of wish list? If you could, what sort of things would you implement?
Wow. So yes, we also have made some recent investments to create a new, trying to think of the best way to describe it, emergency management system. So it keeps track of drills. It will allow for alerting on campuses similar to the system that was used in Georgia where the teacher wore the thing around her neck. We're not doing that same product, but something similar where every staff member will be able to activate a lockdown from anywhere on campus. So that's the next piece that's coming. We're also looking at different infrastructure in terms of in the future, 26, I think we talked about doing a bond. 25 for a bond to look at new door locks. We are currently putting in the card reader locks. Eventually, we'd like to have that on all the school doors, classroom doors, and everything else, so that we can, in the event of a lockdown, it's one button, not just locks the exterior doors, but locks every door on campus. So we're looking at that type of thing, but we're looking at the impact film. People call it bullet resistant, or there is no true bulletproof film that you can put on glass. So we're looking at the bullet resistant or impact resistant film. So there's a lot of things. AI is coming around quickly, and we're looking at getting different camera software that's behind the scenes that helps our cameras. So when we're looking for somebody on campus, instead of having to search for it through hours of film, I can put in, purple shirt and gray pants, and it will look for those colors, and then gives me a list of people. So there's a lot of background stuff, but as far as visible stuff on campuses, the biggest thing that we're trying to do is a lot of our cameras are aging out, and with technology changing so much and the ability to go to, and I'm going to talk outside my knowledge base, but 4K or whatever the new standard is, we'd like to upgrade some of our older cameras, and the district currently has almost, I believe we're at close to 1,600 cameras in the district, and so those that were put in originally are pretty old, and we're trying to upgrade those. So there's a lot of little things that we need, but as far as the big things, I think our biggest project on the horizon, the two things would be the door locks for for all over the district, and the film for the windows.
I just want to add on the cameras. So we need more. There are dead spots, and cameras serve two primary purposes. One, they do help us when something happens. We can go back and figure out who, what, when, where. So it's good from the after-action vantage point. But it's also pretty powerful during any kind of event that's happening. And so when we did our active shooter drill, large scale at Cocopah, and it was the first time that the Real-Time Crime Center in Scottsdale had access to our cameras for that event, something that was supposed to last 2 hours, was over in a very short period of time, because the crime center was able to identify where the active shooters were on campus, and the threat was neutralized in very short order. And so what we thought was going to happen in terms of a hostage-taking situation and other events to prepare us for, we didn't have any of that. There were not even the fatalities and the other injuries that were expected as we were working through this scenario, because we were able to identify so quickly. So the importance of having the cameras, the infrastructure to support the cameras, and having the staff to be able to utilize the cameras, both ours and the police, makes a difference. So school safety and security will be a top area of focus when we do our bond planning for 2025. That planning is starting now. The board approved a contract with an outside company to help facilitate that. It's a pretty fast timeline, because we would need to bring forward a proposal to the governing board by June of 2025 to put something on the November ballot. But school safety and security will be one of the major areas of focus in that proposal.
On the SRO Phase 2 submission, when would we find out about that, and is there anything the parents can help you on?
So I think the grant closes I think it's the 10th or the 18th or something of November. We should find out shortly thereafter, because the open or the first officers to be on campus are slated for January. So it's basically 18 months. It's the remainder, second half of this school year, and then next school year. And what can parents do at this point? There's not a whole lot. The grant is open and ready to go. It's just whether we get selected, and the priority is rural areas that don't have SROs, and then any school after that that does not have an SRO. So we qualify. It's just a matter of how many they get and how much money they have.
I have a follow-up question to the security on campus and the building and all of that. You mentioned bulletproof options and locks and investing into those, but we have schools that have gates that face like main streets, and the children are playing right by that gate. Anybody can walk by, the kids are literally right there. Is anything being done to address that, maybe changing that to a block wall instead of a gate to protect those children?
At this point, most of that is not in discussion, and the reason I say that is we try very hard to balance school safety versus basically sending kids to school in a prison-type atmosphere. And I'm not saying that putting a block wall makes it a prison, but when most of us went to school, we didn't even have fences around some of our schools. And when you go across the country, and I make it a habit whenever I go somewhere to look at their schools, there's still places that don't have fences. So we're trying to balance the safety of the students and the staff and the campus itself versus putting up block walls and things like that. So at this point, no, we're not thinking about that. We do have there are options that we can do besides that, such as screens and things like that. And we have looked at some of those depending on the site and where the location is. It just depends, and most of our fences, especially that face streets, are the wrought iron fences that are more difficult to scale and things like that. We purposely put those there, and the chain link fences against the more private locations or the not so front facing locations. But at the end of the day, if you have a 6 or an 8 foot fence in front of the school, and even if you have a block wall, somebody will find a way over or through or whatever they want to do. So we're not saying no to those. It's just currently the ones the locations we've evaluated, we haven't had a whole lot of support from anybody on campus to do that.
I know that support services does a lot and provides a lot. Could you just talk a little bit about how support services fits in with school safety and school threats?
Yeah, absolutely. So everything that Josh does is so important, and the physical barriers and protecting our schools with school resource officers. And that is incredibly important, especially in the case of an emergency. But really the safest way to keep our schools safe, or I'm sorry, the best way to keep our schools safe is through the prevention, right? And it really starts with, that creating that safe, positive environment where kids come to school, they feel included. If they have a concern, they have an adult to go to on campus. They know that somebody will take them seriously, and they have a place to report that information. What we know is that in every single case where there has been a tragic shooting, somebody has had that information prior to it happening and has not reported that information. And so you look at all of the research and all the studies out there, and it says focus on the prevention, focus on creating that positive, safe environment, supporting students, that pathway to violence. There's a long pathway between when somebody first feels, unheard, or first feels that, that they're being bullied, to the point where, they develop that grudge or that grievance, and then they create a plan, they secure weapons, and they follow through. That whole time is opportunity for us to intervene. And that's where a lot of times we don't talk about that, but, with the threat assessment, kids say a lot of things, and they say it because they have poor problem-solving skills, they're angry, they're upset, they want to scare somebody, they want attention, they're trying to impress. The most of the time, students do not have an intent to hurt or harm, but when they do, that is when we have to be concerned. A lot of times what we know is that our most dangerous situations, they're not going out there and talking about it, right? So with the threat assessments, if somebody poses or we're concerned, we do move forward with that threat assessment. And we start to have a better understanding of the student, what risk factors are in place, what protective factors are in place. How do we make sure that we are providing the right interventions and supports to a student to make sure that our campuses are safe? And again, I know that we don't talk about that a lot, but it's something that I think deserves attention, because we really, really want to make sure that we have meaningful supports in place, that students know that they have adults on campus that care about them, that they can go to for help or to be heard, and we're going to intervene. So thank you.
Thank you.
So when it comes to doing active shooter drills, not necessarily the grand scales like we did at COCOPA, but at the individual schools, what is the frequency in terms of when each school is required to do them? And then when they happen, how are schools graded on their performance, or who looks at that performance, or what's the back end process of what the administration kind of looks at? Was this a successful? Where are lacking things that we need to tweak to make it more successful down the road?
Thanks. So we don't do active shooter drills. Yep, no, you're good. We do lockdown drills, which we would use in the case of an active shooter. The lockdown drills they're required to do 3 a year. One has to be before fall break, one before winter break, and one before spring break. And we don't tell them exactly when to do it because our campuses are so busy that we just give them a range, so they have to be completed before each of those breaks. When they do a lockdown drill, they notify district office, and for at least one, if not more of those drills, I send personnel from the security team, from my supervisory team, out to the site to evaluate what goes on. And we will do at least one per site where we'll be on site and evaluate what happens, and then after each drill, the staff on the campus and it's usually the administrative staff get together with the security officer that's on the campus and discuss things that went right, things that went wrong, things like that, and then they're required to submit a report after each drill. So they're required to do 3 of those. One of them has to be during a non-classroom period. So it can be a passing period, it can be lunch, it has to be a non-traditional classroom period. And then they also have to do 2 shelter-in-place drills. And those 2 shelter-in-place drills can be in concert with a lockdown drill. So they may go into lockdown, do the lockdown drill and then go into shelter-in-place, or the other way around, or they can do it by themselves where they just do a shelter-in-place. And they again, one of those 2, they're required to do 2 of those, and one of the 2 has to be done when it's not a traditional classroom period, so it has to be at a random point again. And the big difference between those 2, if you don't know, so we have 3 types of drills. The lockdown drill is what we'd use for an active incident on campus, where basically we say locks lights at a site. Basically, you lock the door, you shut the lights, and you hide at a site, and nothing happens. You're basically sitting in a corner, for lack of a better word, with the students and keeping everybody quiet while law enforcement or whoever deal with whatever the incident is. A shelter in place can be for any number of reasons. It could be as simple as somebody gets hurt and we're going to bring an ambulance onto campus, and we don't want to have everybody watching that person rolled out through the hallways. So a shelter in place, teaching and learning continue. The students just stay in the classroom. If they're in PE or outside or whatever, then they would come in a room and they're in the room, the door gets locked, and the exterior of campus is locked and the classroom doors are locked, and teaching and learning continues. Things keep happening, but that could be for anything from, we had one next door at Mojave. The police had an incident down on the corner of McDonald and Granite Reef. And they called us and said, hey, if you have any people, get them inside, shelter in place. And we did that. And that, had nothing to do with campus. They never made it to campus, but it's a way for us to keep everybody inside and contained while whatever's going on outside. We've done it for wild animals. Like I said, we do it for medical calls. It just gives us an opportunity to have everybody secured without wandering campus, so we can deal with whatever it is that may not even be part of what's going on campus. And then the last drill is the evacuation drill, and those are the old fire drills that we've all done, and those are required to be done once a month. And each of these types of drills, we send the security leadership out. There's 3 supervisors, and one of us goes out, at least one of us goes out to as many of these drills as we can, and at least 1 per campus for each type, and we evaluate it. But in every drill, they're required, the administration, to do a review of it and submit that information.
When these drills happen, are there any requirements in regards to how many people know about the drill ahead of time? Is this a admin only know the drill ahead of time? Is this the admin and the teachers know the drills ahead of time, but not our paraprofessionals or, lunch ladies, for a better word, right? Like, when these drills happen, is there a marker for who's aware of the situation ahead of time?
So currently there is no standard. We as a district have said that as you go on through the year and continue through the drills, less people should know about them. But I can tell you that in 2026, AD has come out with new standards that we're preparing for that says 2 things. One is that every population and student on the campus must participate. And that's always been a policy here in Scottsdale. A lot of districts, if you have special needs kids or people that can't handle loud noises, they walk them outside of campus before they set off the fire alarm or something like that. Well, that's changed. It's an ADE standard now for 2026 where you can't do that anymore. You have to, you have to, every person and every demographic has to participate in every drill. And then the other thing that they're changing in 2026 is that you can notify for the first drill, but after that you can't notify again. And that is basically because the problem is people are notifying and they're practicing and getting ready for it, and then when they don't know if it's real or not, so they're changing the way that looks moving forward.
I'd like to kind of add on that. Anytime we have an incident, whether it be very small or big, we work with the school district and we do what we call, in military police terms, it's called a hot wash. We talk about the incident, we go over what we learned, what mistakes we made, and what we can, so each person in the room, the decision makers kind of say, hey, this is what I did, this is what I did wrong, this is what I did right, how can I learn from that, how can we make those changes? So even on something small, it doesn't have to be a drill, but just something small, we'll look at and review and go, okay, how can we make this better next time?
I have a question regarding the locks that you guys were talking about that you're hoping to get on campus. Being that every student, staff, et cetera, has to wear a badge now, is that something that the kids are going to be able to badge into a classroom? The reason I ask is because ever since we've been, all doors must be locked, it is such a disruption to have kids constantly coming in, knocking, getting up, knocking. Not every door has a peephole. So the kids are just opening the door nonstop for whoever comes in. And at a certain point, it's like, okay, it's just as much of a disruption to have it locked versus unlocked. So that's the first question I had. But the second question along the same lines as the shelter in place, with the upper grades of elementary and then obviously into middle and high school, when the students are rotating between classes and they're supposed to be in a shelter in place, like what is the intended education intent at that point? Because so at Sequoia, when we just had the real lockdown, I happened to be working on campus that day, and I was with fifth graders that should have been in a different classroom by the time we were able to move from lockdown to shelter in place. But the younger grades just continued on teaching because they don't switch classrooms. The older kids, I was kind of like, what are we supposed to do now? I have to keep these kids. It's not even the right subject anymore. I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm sure, not just as a substitute, but even with the upper grades, that's something that these kids need to be in math and they're in social studies or whatever. Like, how are they actually supposed to continue learning if they can't leave the classroom?
So I'll answer that one first. It depends on why we're into shelter in place. And the Sequoia situation or the Chaparral situation, which was a day later. So at Chaparral High School, if you're not familiar, we had a swatting call. We ended up locking down and then going to shelter in place. And they stayed in their second period class for almost the remainder of the day. What is it? It was a half day that day. So for the rest of the day, they stayed in their second period class. And we do that. A lot of that reason we do that once we're in shelter in place, and for both cases, we lifted the shelter in place shortly after. But part of the challenge we have is then parents love to come take your kid out of school because the incident is over and you want to come get your kid. And at Chaparral specifically, we had to stay in second period because we had so many parents that came to get their kid. If we would have said, okay, go to your next period class, at that point, we don't know where the kids are going necessarily because some went off campus at third period or had EVIT or any number of things. So the same thing when you get to fifth grade, when we lock down or if you switch classes, when we go into shelter in place, we have to make a determination at that point in time. If everything went the way it's supposed to go, we would say, okay, we're done with shelter in place, and it's the clock now says we should be moving to fourth period, we'd move into fourth period and everything would continue the way it goes. Unfortunately, in today's times, when we had a shelter in place at Arcadia 2 years ago, more than 2/3 of the parents came to pick up their kids, even though there was not a single thing that happened on campus. We had a kid that was dressed inappropriately, and somebody made a report, and we found him, and a lot of it depends on the parents and what the situation determines. But our goal in any incident, whether it's a lockdown, a shelter in place, or an evacuation, is to, as quick as we can, get back to teaching and learning. So Sequoia was a great example. Before lunch, everybody was told, here's where we're at, we're done, and we were supposed to be back into normal teaching and learning and switching periods and doing all that stuff. So that's our goal. I can tell you that on the back to your first question, we would love to make it where every door lock works off a student ID. That's one of our goals down the road, depending on how the bond goes, depending on what software, hardware. There's a lot of particulars for that. But we would also have to bring that back to the governing board, because one of the things when we did bring the IDs with the RFID chip into the governing board was that we would only use it for the buses at this time. So before we go any further with using it for anything else on campus, that'll come back so everybody has an opportunity to voice their opinion one way or the other. But if we were able to do that, that could be used for attendance purposes. It could be used for all kinds of things if we got to that point and the governing board approved it.
Going back to the shelter in place, and my kids are at an elementary school, so I know my intel is not the best. But if it goes horribly wrong, are there repercussions to the school? Do they add another shelter in place drill? Do they say to admin, like, hey, don't tell our teachers or anything if it does go badly? And to piggyback off the original question, like, what metrics do you collect from the school? Or are there any metrics that you collect? Be like, you say you go back to district or wherever you go to see how you can do it better the next time, but what if they just don't get better?
So there's a lot of metrics that we look at. We look at the first one is time. And what I mean by that is obviously we want to get into shelter in place, lockdown, evacuation. When you all evacuated for the fire drills, when you were in school, somebody had a stopwatch to tell you when you got there. Where we have the same thing. So every drill is timed, and we want them to improve. We don't want them to go backwards, but at some point, they're going to get as good as they can. We look at, during a lockdown, we look at doors. We go through and how many doors are locked or unlocked. We look at how many, can we hear you in the hallway? And that sounds funny, but can we hear the kids, especially at elementary level, talking and playing or whatever they're doing. At a high school level, it's more the giggling and I'm done with this, or the cell phone music and whatever else is going on. So we look at all that, we evaluate it with the staff, and yes, we can add additional drills. We have not, this is my third year here, we haven't had to add additional drills because of when we find the incidents of challenges. We address it specifically with either the classroom teacher or the person in charge of that. And then we do have, they're called fundamentals, which are online trainings. So we can ask a staff member to go back through training about any of those drills. So it's, I can say thus far, knock on wood, we will always get better at the drills. And hopefully we don't have a real incident, but the times that we have, as Sergeant Bingham mentioned, we do after action reports, and those get done where they're documented, and not just the people from that site get to see it, but we let administrators from across the district see those so that they can learn from it as well, and they can say, oh, look, this school did this, and they get called out for not being able to communicate or whatever it was, and so that everybody's learning every time we do it. We're very fortunate that we don't have these a lot, and the Phoenix Police SRO Sergeant, he covers not just our schools, but Camelback and Central and a couple of the other schools in Phoenix where they have had many weapons on campus and lockdowns and things like that. And he says, for as few times as we have had the real thing, that we do a really good job. So that makes me feel good because he sees the people that do it all the time. And, you know, we meet with Sergeant Bingham and Sergeant Mendez from Phoenix, and then Paradise Valley Officer Fan, and we talk through all of them after every one to see what lessons can be learned. And you guys get the benefits of it. You should, when we had Arcadia 2 years ago, we didn't communicate well. And parents and staff said, hey, we don't want to wait any more than 15 minutes, so now it's our goal to give you information every 15 minutes. Even if it just says, hey, we have nothing new to update, but we're sending you out to let you know that we're still communicating. In the last drill, we talked about in the high school level that we did not communicate with students. We hit the staff and we hit the parents and not the students, and now we're communicating with students, not at the elementary or middle school level, but at the high school level. So we get better every time, and we are encouraging parents. We meet with parent groups after as many of these as we can to say, hey, what feedback do you have, positive, negative? We got to learn from them.
So to kind of piggyback off that, obviously parents get concerned. Is there a plan for sites to have open communication with parents, so instead of all of the parents rushing to the office when something like this happens, that there's a meeting place near the school that everybody is aware of at all times, that like this is where you should go if you feel the need to? No, like in the case of an active shooter, all the parents probably at Chaparral wanted to rush to the school to get their babies. It seems like it would be better to have a different place so that the parents are out of the police's presence, staying as far away as possible, but maybe have a meeting place so that they feel that they're being seen and heard. Is there a plan for that at each site?
So yes, we have a plan for every school, and no, I'm not telling you what it is. And we have changed it. We used to have what we call walking evacuations, where, and a great example would be Desert Mountain and Mountainside. When we had the incident at Mountainside, we could walk kids from Mountainside over to Desert Mountain to evacuate them and meet their parents and things like that. Takes them off of the one campus onto the other. However, if you've watched any of the recent evacuations or incidents that have happened, not necessarily in our district, but across the Phoenix area, parents show up and you're not taking my kid anywhere without me, and they're hopping fences and they're bringing guns and they're all kinds of things. So as a district, we've decided that we will communicate with you every 15 minutes and at the most, and we will tell you where you're going to meet your kid as soon as we know and we can get things set up. So we will not walk kids necessarily from one location to another. We will put them on buses and take them, and we have contracts or intergovernmental agreements with the city. So it may not even be a school. We may take them to the ballpark. We may take them to Westworld. But we will notify you. So a lot of the challenges that we see is that as they release, when the police departments say, Chaparral is a great example. When the incident was over, we had so many parents that showed up, and we told them where to park and how to get there and what to do to receive their child. So we will give you information. When we had the Mountainside incident last year with the weapon on campus, it was great because we were not planning on releasing people from Mountainside. Working with the police department, we had another location set up. We were ready to go at another location, and it wasn't until 5 minutes before that Sergeant Bingham called me and said, hey, we are going to be done, and if you do a late release by 3 minutes, I think it was, then we'll just let everybody go from Mountainside the way it was. And so we kept communicating that, and parents were like, oh, you lied to us, you didn't tell. No, I'm getting the information from police, and we had a whole system prepared to reunify. So reunification is a big process. If we're going to send your kid somewhere to match you and your child and make sure that they only go home with an approved adult is a big process. So it takes us a little bit to get that set up. So to answer your question, we don't have one location. It depends on where I'm taking them. So for me to put out, hey, if you're at Sequoia and we want you to meet at this church, or if you're at Chaparral, you go to this church, we will tell you that as soon as we know and have things in place. But to tell you that ahead of time, all I can tell you is I know you want your kid. We want to get you your kid as fast as possible. One of the changes that we've made now is that all the schools have the away for the day policy with the phones. If a child does have a phone and we get into shelter in place, we are working with staff to encourage the child to text as soon as possible to let you know, hey, I'm okay. And that came out of us doing these debriefs of the parents saying, hey, I don't need a whole lot of info. I just need them to say, I'm okay, or whatever that is. And we understand it. And it's just, how do we control that? And so we're trying to make sure the messaging is appropriate, because especially elementary kids, as you said, they have all kinds of things that they say. So we do want to get you your kid as soon as possible, and that's our goal. But to tell you to go to a certain location today, I can't tell you that, because I never know where we're going to go based on the day, based on what else is going on at the district, at other schools. And so we will make that decision and inform you as quick as we can.
I'm not on campus often enough to have been around during a drill, and I've had the good fortune to not be too proximate to the real thing, as you say. But I'm trying to put myself in the student's shoes, as like thinking about all of this. Does this, and this might be a silly question for people who are more familiar, but does the student know when it's a drill or the real thing when it's happening, or do they find out after the fact?
99% of the time they find out after the fact. And we do that for a reason, because we don't want them to be it's a drill and then they just lollygag to whatever it is. We want them to act the same time, whether it's real or fake or anything else. And that's part of the challenge that we have with, do we tell people ahead of time, whether it's the staff, whether it's, and we, in the last drill I just observed earlier this week, we had one teacher who knew it was a drill and was behind in her lessons or whatever, and she did not participate in the drill and just kept teaching through it. So that, again, is an administrative function that we deal with on the campus. But so yes, we don't tell them ahead of time. We want them to react the same way every time. I do know that once they're secured in a location in the classroom, if it's a lockdown and it's all quiet, most of the teachers at that point, when they know it's a drill, will tell the kids, okay, this is a drill. We also try to get out of lockdown for any drill as quick as possible. And so they'll shut the lockdown tone off and just allow it to be quiet, so that teacher can talk and that they don't have the trauma of the sound continually going off. So, yeah.
And I would say the other thing is we're sensitive to what's going around. So one of the social media posts that was circulating earlier this year indicated that when the fire alarm gets pulled, someone's going to be standing outside waiting with a gun to take action. We canceled some planned fire drills because students would have been fearful of following the fire drill expectations. So what people are doing on social media is really disruptive and harmful to children, which is why the penalties that law enforcement and prosecutors can pursue are really important, both for parents who are responsible in some of these cases, and then our code of conduct for students, because disrupting the learning environment that way is really problematic. But we try to be sensitive to the timing of when we do some of these as well. If something has materialized, we can cancel and reschedule.
Thank you.
Can you clarify what the penalties are? Like if your kid did a social media threat or a hoax, like what is your child facing from the district, from the police department, and what are you as the parent facing as well?
Yeah, so for obviously on the law enforcement side, I wouldn't be able to name all different crimes, but usually you're dealing with, it can be as small as a disorderly conduct, which is just a misdemeanor, up to actual terrorist threat, depending on what was said in a social media thing. We have not arrested a student here in Scottsdale for that, but I know some other Valley agencies have for that one. We've arrested someone from outside the country for that, related to a Scottsdale one from last year or the previous year on that one. But anything from using an electronic device to terrify, harass, annoy, offend, there's just, again, a multitude of crimes that we can look at. It really just depends. Each situation we have to look at independently, how it was affected, how the school was effective, how big it was effective, again, how many kids called out the next day because of a social media post, and different things like that. The parent aspect of how parents can be penalized is a lot more difficult we have to have some real proof that they knew about something or an issue or problem ahead of time before we can start charging stuff, and that can be anywhere from delinquency contributing to delinquency of a minor to other crimes. But again, it just depends on the information. So it's hard to give a catch-all, but there are quite a few crimes we can look at when dealing with parents and students to address these issues. And then again, we work with the school district on both these, share information when it's applicable to, again, get the information again so the school district can act for what they do for their discipline.
Sure. And when it comes to discipline, we do follow the code of conduct. So in a situation where there was a threat, we would remove the student from campus for up to 9 days pending outcome of threat assessment. If you look in the code of conduct, there's a minimum, there's a maximum, depending on the situation, the level of threat. We would also be looking at that disruption and how that interfered with the learning environment. And so the majority of the time, if there was a situation where a student, caused a major disruption, increased fear on campus, that student could be recommended for alternative to expulsion if there was no intent to hurt or harm. Alternative to expulsion, we would also connect the student with outside resources where they would be getting additional support. So we want students to have an understanding of how their behavior impacted others and how it's changed the way that people might think or feel about them, how it's changed the way that people might think or feel about, being in a safe environment. And we want them to learn from that situation. So, and this is again, if, there was an intent made a threat without an intent to hurt or harm. If we do find out that there was a threat and there is that intent to hurt or harm, the majority of the time that would be either expulsion or we would be looking at a different placement for the student, making sure that they're getting, the necessary help or support needed to address their behavior.
The only other piece I wanted to add is that the city of Phoenix has charged the first parent in Arizona civilly for the cost of the investigation. So however many hours it is, whatever resources are used, both from the start of the threat all the way through the investigation, through court and whatever, that they can charge the parents civilly. So Phoenix, I know, has done that now. It hasn't made its way through the courts yet, but that's the next step. Is so when parents are not just getting or cannot get charged criminally, they're also looking at charging civilly now.
Can you ballpark that? Do you know what the ballpark is for that?
Depends on a lot of different things, and part of that is how long how many people have shared the post is a great example. If it's one or two people, we may be able to get to the, we interview one or two people, and when I say we, the police department and us, the school, we interview one or two people, and it may take an hour or two. Some of these threats that have been out there that have been shared 100 times, and we're interviewing lots of people in there at 2 o'clock in the morning and all kinds of stuff. It could be hundreds of hours of work.
I just wanted to say thank you, Dr. Menzel. Well, all of you, but this last go around of the online threat. So I'm a teacher. And that was probably the first time that Friday that I've ever felt nervous, because I was like getting the emails like, this is out there, this is happening. But my students just kept leaving and my classes kept getting smaller. And it was the first time I was like, I'm ready to go home and get my kids that are right up the road. And because it wasn't that it was not a lack of communication. It was just the students leaving was a little unsettling to me, was unsettling to the students remaining. And then that Friday night, I'm home at 8 o'clock sipping my glass of wine, and all of us parents got an email from you. And so I recognized how late you're working on that Friday night. And I read it then, and I got a very respectful but stern tone from you to all of us parents, like, we have to work together to stop this. We can't be doing this. And I really appreciated that communication. And I think it would also be helpful if I'm a staff member. So I got that because I'm a staff member, but I think it would be good if staff members knew that you sent that communication also to families so they feel supported by you. And I know that we can't stop parents from running and picking up their children, but I don't think, we're just thinking about our 1 or 2 children, but parents have got to realize that if one goes and the next goes, they're actually causing more of a threat to that school. You're opening up this campus to visitors and causing disruption and getting in the way. And, you know, I think that, I don't recall you saying anything in that email, but I think you also could help educate our families on how they're working against the people trying to keep their children safe in those situations. But I just wanted to say thank you to all of you, but I really did appreciate that email that night.
And I just wanted to echo that sentiment that as a parent of an Arcadia student, I participated or was involved when the incident happened 2 years ago. And I'm so impressed by the level of reflection after each event and that you push to learn. And even this year through the social media from the beginning of the school year to now, the effort to control the message because you know, our kids all have phones, right? And they don't know what's happening, so they're filling the void with whatever their friends are saying is happening, and then that's the information that we're getting as parents. But the fact that you all have done, I think, or taken a much more concerted approach to educate people, and I recognize it's a total balance because there's only so much information you can share with parents, but I think I just want to commend you that it feels like you've taken that feedback and that it's really productive to control the message at all levels, including the kids, because I feel like that just puts the fire out, right? If everybody gets the same information, it just puts the fire out. So, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I'll ask, this was touched on a little bit, so this was a question that was shared with me for someone who couldn't be here, and it was touched on a little bit. So this is about the procedure for when you share information. So who is responsible for what goes out when, I mean, you mentioned 15 minutes, right? You're trying to communicate within 15 minutes, but like who, what, where, who are the players involved in what's getting communicated to which parties, things like that.
So it depends on the incident, and what I mean by that is oftentimes there's a fight or something on campus that's dealt with by the campus itself, and the responsibility of communicating at that point is by the administration themselves. And they can reach out to district, and we have a communications team that is top-notch that can help them craft a message or work through whatever they want to say to make sure it's appropriate. To answer the questions, and put down any fears, I guess, that parents may have based on what happens. As soon as it becomes a larger incident, like a lockdown, a shelter in place, or any of that type of a threat that involves law enforcement, we work with law enforcement, and so their public information officer and our communications team literally sit across the table from each other during both the Sequoia incident and the Chaparral incident. They sit across the table from each other, and the police department's feeding information to their public information officer to say, hey, you can say this, or you can't say that, or this is what we know. And then we look at it from a school district point of view to say, okay, what can we put out, what can't we put out based on FERPA and whatever else. So we come at it from both sides, and then the two of them sit there and craft a joint message, and we try to put them out together at the same time so that it goes through both law enforcement channels and the school district channels. Our goal, like I said, is to get it out every 15 minutes. Sometimes we may wait a little bit because they're like, hey, we're just about done and we'll tell you this. In the Chaparral incident, I think we did every 12 minutes until the last one was 15 because they said we're going to go into shelter in place. And so we were able to just change that message. And then on the flip side of things, sometimes we may get information right away, and the Mountainside incident was a great example of that. At one point, we put out messages every 5 minutes because we changed where we were going to go. So who is, it's usually the site administrator. If it becomes a bigger incident, it's our communications department working with the police department. What information we go out is a joint discussion, and that's why what goes out from us or the police department are facts. And parents are always like, well, why didn't you tell us this or that? We wait for somebody to verify what actually happened. So the information that we give you will 100% be factual. May not be what you want to hear. It may not have all the information you want, but it will be factual. And when is as soon as we can get it. We try not to go any longer than 12 to 15 minutes. And where you get it is whatever you have signed up, the district sends it out through Parent Square. So if you're signed up on Parent Square through your email, and you can sign up through your text message and voicemail, and we override your settings. Most parents have it on, I want the digest at 5 o'clock every day. In an event like this, it comes right away. And then police department puts it out through X, the old Twitter, but they put it out through X, and that's the place that you'll find their information. So I think that answered.
So in addition, we'll also get media inquiries. And so part of the job of our communications team is to also run interference, to keep the media away from anything that's an ongoing situation or concern, so the police and the people on the campus can take care of what they need to take care of. There is a lot of behind-the-scenes communication to talk about what, when, how. We know most of the people on our team are or have been parents of school-aged children, so can put themselves in your shoes to say, okay, what would I want to know in this moment? And so we try to use that lens. We also want to make sure that everything we send is accurate. So sometimes if there's a delay, it's because we're confirming what we can say. But we also have this other challenge of having to run interference for media who might pick up something on a police scanner and want to be the first to report the swatting incident at Chaparral. And our team will drop whatever they're doing, and I can attest that every person here has dropped what they're doing to respond to an emerging threat, whether it's a hoax or real. People stop what they're doing to respond immediately.
The last thing I want to say is our goal after the main situation is over and we have a chance to take a deep breath is to send a letter home. And it may come from the district, it may come from the superintendent, it may come just from the site principal, but we all work together to put out as much of the facts, the real facts, that we can, staying within our guidelines of everything that can be released based on the police department, based on FERPA and people's rights and things like that. And I will be the first one to tell you that sometimes we make a mistake, and in the word or how we said something, we try and, I don't want to say make a template, because every one of these situations you can do the same thing at the same school 2 days in a row, and it will still be different because human reactions are different. So we may miss a word or change things, but you can be assured that it's not intentional. We're not trying to keep things from you. Our goal in those letters is to give you that final wrap up and give you as much closure as we can. And no, I can't tell you that so-and-so was suspended or was arrested or whatever it is, because most of the time they're minors, and most of the time it's not your child, we hope, and so therefore you can't know what happens to other children. But we try to give you as many facts as we can so that you can feel some sense of closure and moving forward and feel safe to bring your kid back to school the following day.
Any more questions? Okay, thank you so much, panel. This was amazing. I think everyone got a lot of good information, and I really appreciate you guys spending your time with us tonight.
Thank you for letting us be here.
Okay, we'll end tonight's meeting with a few executive board updates. First is upcoming events. Tomorrow, right? Yeah, tomorrow right here at 6 o'clock. Talk about social media and like what we just were discussing on the panel. Katie McPherson is giving a presentation. This is actually for kids and parents. So you can bring, I think it's geared towards 5th grade and up. But Katie, if you have never heard Katie McPherson talk, I highly recommend it. She's very good, and she's going to be talking about kind of navigating the alternate universe that is social media and the internet and being a child. Put you on the mic. Yeah, yeah.
Actually, this presentation is through support services. So every month we host community presentations, and we would love to see more parents there. So each month, October just happens to be National Bullying Awareness Month. And so the majority of what we see kind of when it comes to some of those negative behaviors happens outside of school, online, and through social media. And so that is the focus of this month's presentation. Would love to see more people there. Katie McPherson is absolutely dynamic. She talks a lot about brain development and the difference between boys and girls, and how to address some of these issues. I would be happy to continue sending. I was like, yeah, I'm so thrilled to be here and see that you're promoting this. But just to share our monthly presentations with you, next month we have Stephanie Siete coming, and I don't know if anybody has seen Stephanie Siete, but she is absolutely fabulous. She's going to be at the expo, the SUSD Expo, and she talks about kind of the poisoning in America, but really vaping as more of a behavior. And a lot of our students, 20% of our students, I just looked at our Arizona Youth Survey, report that they have used e-cigarettes over the course of their lifetime. In Arizona, 60% of fentanyl travels through the state of Arizona, so the likelihood of cross-contamination is high. It's something that we want our students to know. We want our parents to know that. There is no safe way to experiment with these types of, substances. And so we try to make sure that we're pushing that information out and educating parents so that we can start those conversations in the home and it follows them to school. So thank you so much for just sharing this information, and I will continue to to send these, the flyers to you. So thank you. Yep, thank you, everybody.
And hopefully you guys saw this. I know this went out to PTO presidents and maybe some of the communications, so hopefully it ended up in your newsletters as well. I know I saw it in Arcadia's newsletter also. Okay, this is like going in chronological order of what's coming up. I'm sure all of you know that there's an election happening. We're going to share this on our social media, but this is just a reminder of all the upcoming dates, right? So the 25th is the last day to request an early ballot. The 29th is the last day to mail it back. November 5th is election day. If you have any question, elections.maricopa.gov has the answer, I promise. It's a very easy to navigate website. And then we also, so SPC, like some of the local newspapers, like the Republic and the Scottsdale Progress did this as well, but we did a Q&A with the candidates who are running for the SUSD governing board. So there's 3 seats that are open, 6 candidates running, all of them answered questions. This won't be shared on the internet, but none of those links are active. You have to type them in. Okay, our next SPC meeting is on November 20th here in the morning. The topic is what to do if your child is being bullied. We're having another panel. We're having Matt Linz, who works with Shannon Cron and Support Services. Dr. Junior Michael is the principal at Ingleside. He's going to be talking about Ingleside is a no place for hate school, and so they have a very proactive approach and culture at that school against bullying. And then we're going to hear from Mojave school psychologist, one of the social workers that we currently have at Desert Canyon Elementary, and we'll have the general counsel, Nicholas Bouzon, as well. Okay, I'm going in date order, but the Shannon mentioned the expo is happening. So this is on, I think this is a Thursday, November 21st. This is at Coronado. If you have elementary kids or middle school kids and you're curious about, there's a lot of really amazing programs at all the schools, language immersion, STEM focus, things like that. This is where you can go, see what else there is in the district. So all the schools are gonna have a booth and you can go talk to people from that school. SPC is also gonna have a table, so come say hi if you go to this expo. Okay, budget update. So we've had a donation come in from a school, and I think the only other things that changed from last month are email, monthly subscription, and then we also paid our reservation fees for the general meetings. So the $293 is for the entire year, and then for some special events that we had last month and that we'll hopefully plan for in the future. Okay, so that was it for executive board updates. If any of the reps have announcements or anyone else has an announcement. Yeah.
I am really happy to see so many reps here. Just to let everybody know, principals and PTO presidents have all been emailed regarding finding reps for your schools. So I guess I don't need to tell you guys all that, but if there is anybody here from a school that isn't a rep, you can go back to your principal and let them know. Also, you may want to, if you know your PTO, PTA, APT treasurer, I know a lot of schools have a line item for SPC. Usually it's about $100, so you can ask them and write us a check, or what is it, Zelle? Something like that.
So that is all, of course, voluntary, but we are a 501c3. We're wholly dependent on donations. We can accept them two ways. So Zelle, I'm really excited about because I finally figured it out. But that's like the online electronic transfer, and you get 100% of it. Or we can accept checks as well, and that address is our PO box. You can either bring it in person if you want it, or pop it in the mail. Okay, and that is my last slide. So, any questions? But thank you all for coming, and hopefully I'll see you either at the expo or the next meeting.